Now imagine placing that iceberg inside your own mind. Where the tip meets the massive section below the surface, picture a small door. Standing at that door is a tiny gatekeeper. During the day, while we're busy working, studying, and living our lives, we rely on the small tip of the iceberg, our conscious mind. It takes in everything around us. Everything we see, everything we hear, every smell, every conversation. Some of those memories seem to disappear almost immediately. Others fade away after weeks, months, or even years. But according to Freud, they never truly disappear. They simply slip through that little door and settle into the enormous iceberg beneath the surface of the unconscious mind. The strange part is that we're completely unaware of it. Although the unconscious undeniably exists, the only part we can directly experience is the small portion above the water, our conscious awareness. Only when our mental guard lets down does the unconscious get a chance to break free. It's as if the little gatekeeper becomes distracted for a moment. The memories, emotions, and hidden desires locked beneath the surface rush through the door and spill into consciousness, an attractive partner, a practical decision. But Freud argued that many of our choices are influenced by forgotten experiences buried deep inside the unconscious, experiences we no longer remember, yet that continue to shape our behavior every single day. One of my professors once said something that has always stayed with me. This is why psychoanalysis is, at its core, the study of the unconscious mind. Now that we've covered Freud's theory, it's time to meet the woman whose case helped shape modern psychology. Anna. Earlier, I mentioned that the Anna O case became a milestone in the history of psychoanalysis. Because of that, many people assume Sigmund Freud was her psychiatrist. He wasn't. In fact, Freud never even met her. The doctor who treated Anna was Dr. Joseph Breuer, whom we'll simply call J. Breuer was Freud's mentor and one of his earliest collaborators. Anna was a 21-year-old unmarried woman from a wealthy Jewish family in Vienna. When she first visited J, she complained of only one problem, a persistent cough. J wasn't convinced. A cough alone isn't why someone comes to see a psychiatrist, he thought. If there's more to the story, we'll find it, so he decided to hypnotize her. The purpose of hypnosis is to quiet the conscious mind. It's like making the little gatekeeper at the door of the unconscious grow sleepy. Once the guard lowers his defenses, memories and emotions buried deep beneath the surface are free to emerge. Thoughts the patient could never fully explain suddenly become accessible. The hypnosis worked. Jay helped Anna recover memories that had long been buried. Some reached all the way back to her childhood. Others were much more recent. At the time, she was caring for her seriously ill father, a responsibility that had left her physically exhausted and emotionally overwhelmed. When the hypnosis ended, Jay calmly explained what he believed was really happening. Anna immediately burst into tears. It was as if someone had finally understood what she had been unable to put into words. For the first time, she completely opened up. My cough isn't the only problem, she admitted. My eyesight and hearing don't seem right anymore. My neck constantly hurts. I get terrible headaches in my right arm and right leg keep going numb. After listening carefully, Jay suspected something much more serious was unfolding. He decided to keep Anna under close observation. His instincts proved to be right. Just 2 weeks after that first appointment, Anna suddenly lost the ability to speak for a short time. Then something even stranger happened. Without warning, she began switching between two completely different identities. One moment she was herself. The next, someone else had taken over. Anna now had a second personality. She was loud, defiant, impulsive. If someone irritated her, she'd explode into an angry outburst without hesitation. She behaved in bizarre ways, like ripping every button off her blouse for no apparent reason. It was as though an entirely different person had moved into the same body. That perfectly illustrates another common feature of alternate identities. They can be hostile, controlling, and even display antisocial behavior. On April 5, 1881, Anna's father passed away. You might expect her condition to improve now that the burden of caring for him was gone. Instead, it became dramatically worse. As time went on, her condition continued to deteriorate. She even began showing signs of suicidal behavior. On June 7, 1881, Dr. J arranged for her to be admitted to a specialized care facility where she could be monitored around the clock. Throughout that time, he tried every treatment he could think of. Nothing worked. Then a new symptom suddenly appeared. Anna refused to drink water. Doctor. J immediately realized the situation had become dangerous. Without water, her life was at risk. He decided to hypnotize her once again. This time, the answer surfaced almost immediately. While under hypnosis, Anna recalled a disturbing memory. She had once seen a dog drinking from a glass of water. The sight had disgusted her so deeply that she unconsciously developed an intense fear of drinking from a glass herself. Doctor. Jay encouraged her to fully express the emotions she had buried. When she woke from hypnosis, something remarkable had happened. Her fear of water was gone. In that moment, Dr. Jay realized he had stumbled upon a powerful therapeutic principle: emotional catharsis. By helping patients openly release painful emotions they had long suppressed, their symptoms could begin to disappear. He quickly applied the same technique to Anna's other symptoms. One after another, many of them improved. It was a major breakthrough. Later, Sigmund Freud expanded this idea into one of the central principles of psychoanalysis. He argued that many psychological symptoms are rooted in repressed emotions, and that bringing those hidden feelings into conscious awareness can be profoundly healing. Even so, while many of Anna's symptoms improved, her dissociative identity disorder did not simply disappear. Her friends often described her as living two completely different lives. On one hand, she was a gentle, educated woman from Vienna's upper class. On the other, she was a fearless feminist, a passionate social reformer, and an outspoken advocate for women's rights. Her diagnosis never stopped her from achieving extraordinary things. In fact, many people with serious mental illnesses go on to live successful, meaningful lives despite the challenges they face. Over the following decades, Anna became the director of a Jewish orphanage in Frankfurt. She helped establish the Jewish Women's Association. She founded a home for unmarried mothers, and she devoted much of her life to improving the lives of women and children. That concludes the story of Anna. Now we can finally turn to the question that matters most. What actually causes dissociative identity disorder? Many people living with dissociative identity disorder, once commonly known as multiple personality disorder, describe experiencing severe psychological trauma during childhood. Today, let's enter the story of Sybil. Sybil's childhood was filled with fear. Her mother struggled with serious mental illness, and during her episodes, she caused tremendous harm to young Sybil. Her father witnessed what was happening, yet he never truly protected his daughter. For a child, the most terrifying thing is not only physical pain. It is living in a place that should provide love and safety, while feeling afraid every single day. Growing up, Sybil repeatedly experienced harm from her mother. Those experiences went far beyond what a child could emotionally endure. Over time, her mind developed a powerful survival mechanism: escape. When a child cannot escape their environment and cannot stop what is happening, the brain may create psychological distance. It becomes a way to temporarily separate from unbearable pain. The child may imagine becoming someone else, living in another world, becoming a person who doesn't have to feel the same suffering. Over time, this protective response can become a much more complex separation of identity. These experiences do not simply disappear. Some pain becomes buried deep inside memory. Some wounds cannot be seen, yet they continue affecting a person's life for years. Sybil's story leaves us with an important question. If a child grows up surrounded by fear, what can they do to protect themselves? Sometimes, the human mind creates a completely different world not because someone is weak, but because the brain is trying to survive. In extreme situations, creating another version of yourself can become the mind's final defense against overwhelming pain. Now let's bring the D brothers back and let them answer the question we raised earlier. Why did little d, middle D, and big D appear? Let's look again at the moments when each identity emerged. Little D first appeared when D was 6 years old. That was the moment he witnessed his mother stabbing his father. Middle D appeared because D's mother sometimes liked dressing him as a girl. During one of those situations, Middle D quietly came into existence. Big D appeared when D was 10 years old. He was brutally attacked by a group of white teenagers. At that moment, Big D appeared and declared that his entire purpose was to protect D. Now let's look at their personalities. Little D was calm, polite, intelligent, and highly self-controlled. Middle D was a hopeless romantic, a personality that chased attraction and excitement. Big D was completely different. He was aggressive, ruthless, and violent. Does everything suddenly make sense? After witnessing his mother's uncontrolled violence, young D was deeply traumatized. He couldn't accept the image of his mother as someone dangerous and unpredictable. Deep down, he wished she could have been gentle, calm, and emotionally controlled. But reality refused to change. The pain was too much, so his mind created someone who could become everything he needed. Little D appeared, a personality that was calm, rational, in control, everything D himself wished he could be. Then came Middle D. Because his mother repeatedly dressed him as a girl, D felt confused, angry, and powerless. Inside, he wanted to be seen as a strong boy, someone masculine, someone who could define himself. But he couldn't change his situation. The frustration became unbearable. So Middle D appeared, a personality that represented freedom, confidence, and the ability to chase what he wanted. Then came Big D. After D was brutally beaten and humiliated by a group of white teenagers, he felt completely powerless. In his imagination, he became a hero. Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, Iron Man, Captain America. Someone strong enough to fight back. Someone nobody could hurt again. But reality remained unchanged. The pain was still there. So his mind created Big D, a violent protector who would never allow anyone to harm him again. However, childhood abuse is not the only cause of severe psychological trauma. Trauma can also come from other extreme experiences: war, natural disasters, life-threatening accidents. Any event that overwhelms a person's ability to emotionally process what happened can leave deep psychological scars. Sometimes, when reality becomes unbearable, the human mind creates its own way to survive. Psychologists have described cases where children experienced unimaginable trauma. In a war zone, one little girl reportedly witnessed both of her parents being killed by a landmine. Overwhelmed by grief, she desperately tried to put their bodies back together piece by piece, unable to accept what had happened. There are also people who develop dissociative identity disorder because, on a subconscious level, they are trying to escape their current reality. For example, escaping a lawsuit, escaping unbearable pressure from work or daily life, escaping the pain of losing someone they love. Sometimes the mind creates another identity because reality has become too difficult to face. In addition, genetic factors may also play a small role. At this point, we can see a pattern. Dissociative identity disorder usually develops after a person experiences extreme physical or psychological trauma. But someone might ask, isn't post-traumatic stress disorder also caused by severe trauma? Yes, exactly. So why do some people develop DID after trauma, while others develop PTSD instead? To understand this, we need to look at how people differ psychologically. In many developed countries, income distribution is often described as having a bell-shaped curve. A small number of people are extremely wealthy. A small number are extremely poor. Most people fall somewhere in the middle. Psychological sensitivity works in a similar way. Some people are extremely easy to influence through suggestion. Others are very resistant. These two groups sit at opposite ends of the curve. Most people are somewhere in between. They are the psychological middle class of suggestibility. People who are highly suggestible may have a greater ability to mentally separate themselves from overwhelming trauma. Their mind can create distance from unbearable experiences. The identity can split into different parts. And in some cases, this may develop into dissociative identity disorder. People who are extremely resistant to suggestion may not have that same psychological escape mechanism. Instead, they may experience the trauma more directly and develop conditions such as PTSD. So what about everyone in the middle? What happens to them? The answer is simple. It depends. Not everyone who experiences severe trauma will develop DID or PTSD. Childhood trauma can be especially damaging because children have fewer ways to protect themselves or escape. But when adults face extreme experiences later in life, the outcome depends on many factors: their personality, their support system, their coping abilities, and how their own mind responds to the trauma. Research suggests that only people who are biologically and psychologically more sensitive to anxiety and emotional stress may be at higher risk of developing these disorders. Some people can experience the most severe psychological trauma imaginable and still show strong resistance. However, dissociative identity disorder remains a highly debated topic in psychology. Here are some points worth knowing. First, Although many therapists have studied cases of DID during their careers, most mental health professionals rarely encounter a real case in everyday practice. Second, to some extent, the diagnosis and treatment of DID may be influenced by cultural factors. The majority of reported cases have come from the United States, which has led some researchers to question whether culture affects how the disorder is identified and treated. Third, DID has been discussed in relation to gender differences. Most reported patients are women, with some studies suggesting a ratio of approximately 1 man for every 9 women. Fourth, hypnosis can sometimes be used during the treatment. However, hypnosis may also create risks. During therapy, some people can become highly influenced by suggestions. In an attempt to escape emotional pain, they may begin developing different identities. That is why hypnosis is not something every therapist can simply perform without proper training and experience. Now, let's talk about the treatment of dissociative identity disorder. To explain this, I went back and watched the movie Identity again, and I finally understood the hidden meaning behind the story. Except for the criminal investigators, the psychologists, and the legal professionals, almost everyone else in the movie, the prostitute, the married couples, the child, the motel owner, the police officer, and the killer were actually different identities inside the same man's mind. That is why they all shared the same birthday. Later, when the bodies of the people who died mysteriously disappeared, it represented something symbolic. Those identities were being absorbed and integrated back into the main personality. The violent events happening inside the motel were not real events. They represented the man's internal struggle as his mind tried to deal with and integrate his different identities. The battle was happening inside his own consciousness. In real life, treatment works differently. A therapist may use methods such as hypnosis to help bring out different identity states. These sessions may be recorded so the therapist can analyze when each identity appears, what triggers it, and what purpose it serves. Just like analyzing the D brothers, therapists try to understand the origin and role of each identity. Then they communicate with each identity separately. The goal is not to destroy these identities. Instead, the therapist helps them understand that integration into a complete person can benefit everyone involved. Each identity is still a part of the same person. In the movie's ending, the psychologist convinces one of the identities, the police officer, to disappear. The identity is eventually eliminated during the final confrontation. However, one dangerous identity remains. The violent child personality avoids integration. After eliminating another identity, it takes control again. Inside the car, the man suddenly attacks the psychologist and kills him. The hidden danger was still inside. Psychology case records a question from a reader. I'm an only child. When I was young, I was often hit by some abusive teachers. I was too afraid to tell my parents. I also struggled to connect with classmates, so I often felt extremely lonely. I started imagining that there was another version of me inside my body, a male version of myself who was always there to accompany me. This has continued for about 9 years. Every day, I ask him, why haven't you appeared yet? Then, I don't know whether it is me or him answering, soon. The time is almost here. Could this become dangerous? Is constantly giving myself this kind of suggestion harmful? I know that I am trying to escape reality. I often unconsciously reject myself. Could this cause dissociative identity disorder? Or could it be a delusion? Author's answer, I actually mentioned this earlier in the article. I cannot say it is impossible, but in most cases, the core personality and other identity states are not aware of each other's existence, especially the core personality. It is usually unaware of the existence of the other identities. In the world of the core personality, there may be moments of memory loss. During those moments, the person may actually have switched into another identity state. But the situation you described, every day I ask him, why haven't you appeared yet? And then I don't know whether it is me or him answering, soon. The time is almost here. This kind of self-suggestion will not cause dissociative identity disorder. The reason is simple. Everything is still happening under your conscious control. You know you are imagining it. You know you are creating this conversation. That happens when parts of the mind that are outside conscious control become separated. In other words, the problem comes from unconscious processes, not from a person intentionally imagining another version of themselves. As for delusions, that belongs more to the field of psychotic disorders, which we will discuss later. A reader once sent me a message saying that he believed he had dissociative identity disorder. However, as mentioned earlier, in most cases, the core personality and other identity states are not aware of each other's existence. So his situation was not actually dead. Here is part of his message. I suddenly feel like I understand something. Normally, I am someone who often reflects on my own behavior. I am careful with my words and actions. But sometimes, I suddenly feel like I become a completely different person. Afterward, I don't even understand why I thought that way or why I acted that way. I feel confused about myself. Let me start with my main personality. I am usually easygoing, weak, timid, easily embarrassed, emotional, sometimes cheerful, expressive, and very sympathetic toward others. But under certain situations, I suddenly become another kind of person. One situation is when I receive harsh criticism. When I see someone's aggressive gestures and angry expression, I suddenly transform from a fearful person into someone cold, numb, and full of hostility. The most recent example happened on the subway. A person sitting in front of me stood up. I was about to take the seat when someone behind me suddenly tapped me. I followed where their finger was pointing and saw a pregnant woman behind me. At that moment, I immediately felt embarrassed. I apologized and stood up, ready to give her my seat. But then I suddenly looked at the person who tapped me. She was staring at me very seriously. Her finger was still pointing at me. Her expression looked like she was accusing me. And suddenly, something inside my mind changed. I could actually feel myself changing. The embarrassed expression on my face disappeared. I became cold and emotionless. I looked back at the person who was staring at me and sat down again. I didn't move. She kept staring at me, and I just sat there with a blank expression. Only after she got off the train did I finally relax. Then I immediately regretted it. I wondered why I didn't just give up my seat. I noticed that whenever someone criticizes me in a very aggressive way, my brain seems to suddenly shut down. Then I become extremely rebellious. But if someone gives normal criticism, I will apologize immediately and correct my mistake. I never feel hatred towards someone who points out my problems. Another situation happens when I experience harm. I suddenly become extremely impulsive, fearless, and aggressive. Normally, I am actually someone who reacts slowly. If something harmful happens very quickly, I usually don't have much reaction. But if the harm happens slowly, and I can clearly confirm that someone is hurting me or another person, I suddenly become extremely emotional. I can argue aggressively. Sometimes, I even feel like I could physically fight. Once, I saw a thief on a bus. The thief was stealing someone's wallet. My heart immediately tightened. I quickly looked away because I was scared, but the thief kept searching through the person's pocket for a long time. The second time I secretly looked over, I saw that the thief was still trying to steal something but couldn't find anything. This time, I wasn't as afraid. I kept watching for a while. I realized the thief kept trying but couldn't get what he wanted. After taking a few deep breaths, something inside me suddenly changed. I felt like I became a completely different person. A very calm and fearless person. In a cold voice, I said to the victim, "Watch your bag." Then the thief looked at me. I stared back at him aggressively. My whole body was shaking. And strangely, I even had an irrational urge to grab the thief and jump off the bus together. Another time, someone was selling products to us. At first, I thought the product was fake. I didn't want to buy it, so I just smiled and waved my hand. But my friend seemed interested. She asked about the price. The seller said it cost $1,000. I immediately thought, that's way too expensive. This person is trying to take advantage of her, but my friend seemed okay with the price and continued asking questions. I was shocked. I thought, you can't actually be falling for this, right? The two of them kept talking. I just stood there, completely stunned. My mind seemed to freeze for a moment. When I finally recovered, they were already discussing how much to buy. Then suddenly, I exploded. Normally, I am not good at arguing. But at that moment, my brain became extremely sharp. I started listing every reason why the product was fake. I couldn't stop talking. Then I went too far. I started attacking the seller personally. The seller was shocked at first, but after I continued insulting her, she became angry too. She looked like she wanted to fight, and I didn't hesitate. I immediately moved forward, ready to fight back. My friend was terrified and quickly pulled me away. Before this, I always thought maybe I was just emotionally unstable. But after reading that deep changes often have specific triggers, I started questioning myself. The trigger for my first change seems to be visual. When someone gives me a very aggressive expression or uses threatening body language, I suddenly change. While in that state, my mind is completely focused on that person's expression. However, if someone only uses harsh words, it usually does not trigger me. It is the facial expression and physical behavior that affect me. The trigger for my second change seems to come from my thoughts. It feels like a voice inside my head tells me, this person is doing something harmful. The thought repeats again and again until my entire mind is filled with it. Then I suddenly explode. I become extremely emotional. My body starts shaking, and I become highly aggressive. After hearing this story, which type do you think this person belongs to? Is it dissociative identity disorder? Or simply an emotional reaction caused by past experiences? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more psychology stories and real case analysis.